But I'm just going to put this up there, and I'm going to go back to this other discussion that we had last class. And I want to make sure that you get this. I talked a lot about what produced industrialization, and I kept talking about this being intellectual history. Today, not so much intellectual history, but can someone tell me some of the seeds that led to industrialization? Just throw them out there. Good.
Scientific method.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Scientific revolution. This is critical. And if you remember, the scientific revolution is pretty early. We're looking at like late 1400s, the end of the Renaissance, all the way to the kind of late 1600s. What else? There's another big one that we talked about. Go ahead. You what? Okay, you're right. I didn't spend a lot of time talking, but I did. I was talking about the agricultural revolution and how that increased the population. So it's true, the demographic change. I would say ag-rev, which is leading to this demographic change. Okay, and we'll explain why that's a big deal. There's a last concept that I spent a lot of time talking about. Enlightenment. Okay. And what was the Enlightenment?
Movement that applied scientific methodology to social problems.
Boom, absolutely right. Okay, so exactly. So the beauty of this, and I hope you got this. So if not, I'm going to make it really explicit now. Does industrialization just happen? No, it does not. It has a very long precursor. We're going to put industrialization, we're going to put date ranges here. I'm going to say 1780s, even though it's really 1790 that we really begin to see this. And I'm going to push it all the way up, the industrialization, up until around 1900. It's not an overnight phenomenon, but more importantly than this, it does not begin in 1780. It doesn't begin in 1790. This is a movement that goes way back, and I would argue, into the European Middle Ages. And this was a point that I was trying to make, and I don't know if you may connect the dots. Why did I talk about monotheism and scientific revolution? Anybody remember this? Go ahead.
Because monotheism needed the earth under one God, and so there would be one creation.
One nature to study. Yes. Why did I talk about that? You're absolutely right. Why did I talk about that?
Because if there's more than one, they always see another God.
Okay, you're very close. Why is that important? I used it as a segue from a previous discussion. What was the previous discussion? Why didn't Asia have a scientific revolution? Is that what the question was? That's exactly what the question was. Amazingly right. And why not? They didn't have one single nature. They just flat didn't have it. Remember, we talked about there being kind of a lot of pseudoscience in alchemy. Alchemy went from Asia through the Middle East into Europe. When it hit Europe, boom, it becomes a scientific revolution. It's not a scientific revolution in Asia. In Asia, what is alchemy? I mentioned this. I don't know if you guys caught why I was talking about it. How many spirits, according to the Taoists, do I have in my body?
A lot.
Like 36,000, right? Because everything is done by some spirit. So what are you doing in alchemy? You're trying to understand the unseen world. Today, Taoism is still kind of mystical. It's no longer a religion. Feng Shui, have you ever heard of Feng Shui? Totally Taoist. You ever heard of yoga? Do you know why you get into those positions?
You're trying to flush out your spirits or something?
Yes!
Oh.
Your chi, right, is in your body, but it likes to pool up in certain places. And so you are doing the gymnastics in order to push it in all the areas of your body. It's a Taoist idea. Feng Shui is that the spirits are kind of in your household and you're trying to push these things in order to make it work. This is not scientific. It's like almost the exact opposite of scientific. Scientific is observational for the most part. We're looking at inductive reasoning. There's no observation here.
It's more placebo.
And part of it is not placebo. It's more of an intuition. It's certainly deductive reasoning. It's intuition of things that you cannot see. The point here is that the reason why they don't have a scientific revolution in the East is because there's no monotheism. Once it gets to the West, all this alchemy, boom, scientific revolution. Huge. Francis Bacon, I talked about, you guys know about Francis Bacon, he's the one that comes up with the scientific method. He loved alchemy. His first book was really talking about alchemy. Today we look at alchemy as the predecessor to chemistry. So all your chemists love alchemy because it's like you're trying to change lead into gold, right? How do we do that today? Well, we can't. But when we're trying to make things, potions, boiling, all that melting, that's all chemistry. It comes out of alchemy. The point here, is it an accident that industrialization starts in Europe? No. It's not an accident that it starts in Europe. Is it an accident that within Europe it starts in England? The reason why I make this comment is that you guys have a bunch of textbooks that are talking about this. And according to your textbooks, who was more successful around 1700? And I shouldn't say your textbooks, some of your very, very recent textbooks. Who's more successful around 1700? Asia or the West? Asia. According to your textbooks, they are looking at industrialization as if it were an accidental product of 1800. They got industrialization, boom, they just pushed right forward. To me, it's almost historical malpractice because it assumes that it just pops up. Does anything, you've studied lots of history, does anything just like pop up? There's a predecessor, something that comes before it. And for industrialization, all of this comes before it. Deep into the Middle Ages. And I would argue even before that, you're looking at trends of humanism that was set by the Greeks and the Romans. Just like Taoism is a trend that was set by the early Han Dynasty in China. It's a long prelude. It wasn't an accident that it was Europe that went to discover China and Japan. It's kind of a byproduct of that scientific revolution, that scientific discovery. So having said that, it's very important to understand that industrialization is really unique to Europe. And so this helps us to understand when we talk about Europe and we talk about the places where it goes. It's not just that these guys are greedy and bigoted and racist or sexist or whatever else you want to throw on them. They are different in their worldview. We saw that with China, obviously, and Japan. We're going to see that in India, and absolutely we're going to see that in the Middle East. Now here's a funny thing. So all of these guys kind of are toward the east. But if I look at all three of these, is there a further major division between these three guys? Two on one side, one on the other. What is that major division? You're right. Yeah.
India, China, Japan, all kind of had the same religious. Middle East is
That's exactly right. It's the Middle East. Today,